Scattered all across the lakes and wetlands of Europe, there's this incredible hidden world, a whole network of villages built right on the water over 5,000 years ago. These are the prehistoric pile dwellings, and they're so special that UNESCO recognizes them as a World Heritage Treasure. So let's dive into this amazing submerged past and find out what life was really like for these ancient communities.
So, when you picture lake dwellers, you probably imagine something kind of like this, right? These rustic, almost romantic little huts sitting up on stilts over the open water. This whole image was really shaped by the first discoveries back in the 19th century and all the art that came after. It's a great story, but how much of it is actually true? And that's the big question, isn't it? Are we looking at a real picture of the past, or is it more of a historical fantasy? It's time to peel back the layers and see what modern science has to say about it. Okay, and this shot just shows the difference perfectly. On the left, you've got the romantic myth. And on the right, well, that's the scientific reality. This is an underwater photo from a German site called Degersee 2. And what you're seeing is a stratified profile. It's not just a bunch of random posts in the water. It's more like a layer cake of history, where every single layer tells a story. This is where the real secrets are hidden.
So how in the world did they build this stuff? Let's zoom in on the German Alpine foreland, which was really a heartland for these amazing communities. I mean, their skills in engineering and their knowledge of the environment were frankly just mind-blowing. So you got to picture the setting. This whole area was carved out when the last glaciers retreated. They left behind this rolling landscape of hills, ridges, and just a huge network of wetlands and little lakes. It was the perfect place, really, for a society that wanted to live right on the edge between land and water.
Now here's where it gets really cool. How do we know exactly when they built these villages? Well, the secret sauce is a technique called dendrochronology. By matching the unique patterns of tree rings in the wood they used, archaeologists have basically built a time machine. It lets them pinpoint the exact year a tree was cut down.
And I mean pinpoint. At one settlement, for instance, at Brigashassee, they can tell us that the timbers for a new building were cut down in the year 3830 BC. Think about that. That's not a ballpark figure, that's not an estimate, that's a date. It's a direct link to a single moment almost 6,000 years ago.
So, okay, you want to build one of these houses. How do you do it? Well, there was a whole system. First, you'd pick a good spot, not way out in the deep water, but in a sheltered area in the reeds by the shore. Then you drive dozens of wooden piles, usually alder or ash because they're good in water, deep into the soft mud. On top of that, you build your floor and then the house itself. A solid timber frame with walls made from woven branches packed with a mix of clay and dung. We call it wattle and daub. And some of these houses were pretty big.
So they've built these amazing villages, but what was it actually like to live there? Well, the very same water that made building so tricky also created the perfect time capsule. Because there's so little oxygen down there, all the organic stuff that would normally rot away was perfectly preserved.
I mean, everything they dropped or threw away just piled up in layers under the village. We're talking lost tools, bits of food, scraps from making clothes, broken pottery. In some spots, we've even found their footprints, saved in the mud for thousands of years. It's like a perfectly preserved diary of their entire lives. And what did they eat? From what we found, they had an incredibly rich and varied diet. They were really good farmers, growing cereals and raising cattle, sheep, and pigs. But they were smart. They didn't just rely on that. They also gathered wild stuff like hazelnuts and acorns, hunted deer and boar in the woods, and, of course, they fished the lakes for pike and perch. They had all their bases covered.
And it wasn't just about survival either. These were sophisticated people. At German sites like Degersee 2, we found things like clay loom weights and spinning whorls, which is clear proof they were making complex textiles. We've also found perfectly preserved grape seeds. Yeah, that suggests these Alpine folks might have been making wine thousands of years before the Romans showed up.
And get this, when scientists analyzed the gunk left inside their pottery, they found another layer of complexity. They realized that these people had specialized pots for different jobs. It's like they had their everyday utilitarian cooking pots, but then they also had specific vessels just for milk and making dairy products. That's a level of kitchen organization that feels very, very modern. And all this complexity wasn't happening in a bubble. We now know that these weren't just isolated little tribes. They were part of a huge, interconnected world that stretched across Europe. In a way, you could almost call them some of the world's first global villagers.
I mean, just look at this map. Every single one of those black dots is a pile-dwelling site. The whole alpine region of Germany, Switzerland, and Austria was a bustling, densely populated landscape. These villages weren't just neighbors, they were hubs in a massive network of trade and communication. And the stuff they were trading and how far it traveled is just staggering. Special bronze spearheads made in the Alps have been found all the way up in Denmark. And coming the other way, they were importing these beautiful little glass beads from workshops in what's now northern Italy. And maybe the biggest giveaway? Standardized metal weights start showing up everywhere. A clear sign they had a pretty sophisticated system for managing all this trade.
Now, as these networks grew, society itself started to change. And one of the most fascinating clues we have is a simple little object that starts appearing in the late Bronze Age. The door key. I mean, think about it. What does it mean when a society starts locking its doors? It hints at brand new ideas about private property, about privacy, about what's mine versus what's ours. So you have this incredible civilization that thrives for, 3.5 millennia? And then, poof, it's gone. The villages were abandoned. The tradition just stopped. So the final huge question has to be, why did they all disappear?
Well, the answer seems to be a kind of perfect storm. First, the climate took a nasty turn. Around 850 BC, a cold, wet period kicked in. Lake levels shot up, flooding their homes and ruining their fields. But at the exact same time, the world was changing around them. The major trade routes across Europe shifted, completely bypassing their old heartlands and cutting them off from the economic networks they had depended on for centuries.
So in the end, it wasn't just one thing. It was this devastating one-two punch of an environmental crisis hitting at the same time as a total economic collapse. A way of life that had been so resilient for so long just couldn't survive that combined shock.
So the people themselves vanished from the lake shores. But the lakes became the guardians of their world, preserving everything for us to find thousands of years later. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other incredible secrets are still down there, sealed in the mud, just waiting to completely change what we think we know about our own past?